Hi, Choose Life Nation. This is Dallas Cohen, the Rebound Coach, and you are watching or you're listening to another episode of the Rebound Coach Live. Y'all, let me tell you, today I have a really important message to share with you. It's so important that I had all sorts of technical difficulties, had to set up a completely different way, and here we are, much, much later than our normal broadcast time. So if you're hanging out on Facebook and you hopped on this second attempt at the live, I want to say thank you. Thank you for sticking with me. Thank you for hanging out with me today. If this is your first time sharing virtual space with me, I want to say thank you for joining. This is the Rebound Coach Live. Yes, it is. I'm Dallas Cohen, the Rebound Coach. And if you're not sure what a rebound coach is, I help people get unstuck. I'm a life coach and I help people get unstuck. Particularly, I serve high achieving women of faith who have lived through betrayal or trauma or abuse and who want to reclaim territory in their relationship with themselves. And so that's not quite an easy task. And it started with my own story. Y'all, I was married for 10 years to a man who wanted me dead. And that's definitely not a laughing matter. It's not something out of the movies. It's something that actually happened to me. And it didn't make sense for someone like me. I was raised in a good Christian home. I had parents who loved God. They loved each other. They were married for a lifetime. And they were a good example of marriage, at least from my account. And so it didn't make sense. What also happened was I was molested from the time I was 8 to the time I was 16. And those are identity forming years. It radically affected how I saw myself. It affected how I related to God in a household of faith. And it affected how I related to men. So, fast forward, I met the man that I married and eventually divorced. And there were definitely red flags. There were definitely reasons for us not to be together or stay together. But as a praying woman, I believed that God's answer was yes. And because of that, I believed whatever would happen, we would outlast it, we'd overcome it. God would swoop in and save the day, and things would just radically change. And all I had to do was do my part. And y'all, I did my part to the very best of my ability. And I can tell you that God did swoop in and change things, just not in the way I was anticipating. So we got into this cycle of what I call coping in crisis. Trouble, the trouble we thought that I would outlast, that I thought we'd outlast, that I thought we'd overcome. That trouble came right away and never quite left. We just got into this coping and crisis cycle. So what does that look like? That's when um, you are walking on eggshells trying not to upset him. You are trying to follow all the rules that he sets, even though the rules keep changing. You are justifying and making excuses for his abuse. And you're just doing your best to like make it, to cope. And then, despite your best efforts, something blows up. And in our situation, there was a mental health crisis. He has a mental health condition, and that caused breakdowns every so often. So we'd get into this coping dance where we are doing our very best. Well, I'm doing my very best to survive, and it was kind of like a house of cards, and every so often that house of cards would just blow over, and that would be a mental health crisis that would break everything down, and then we'd have to reset. I was extremely hopeless. I was suicidal. I didn't know how to make things better. I was extremely committed to my marriage, and I knew that he was not committed to changing. And so I had some really important decisions to make. But even so, my decision every day was to keep standing for my marriage, to keep doing what I believed was the right thing. And things kind of came to a head end of 2019, beginning of 2020. We had a crisis again, a mental health crisis, but right in the middle of that, he left for another woman. And I found out a day later he and that woman had been plotting my murder, and had been doing so for months by the time I found out about it. So, needless to say, your whole world stops. This is the record scratch moment. Um, I had some really important decisions to make. And it was a really scary, scary, scary time. Um, your whole life is threatened. You're threatened as a wife, as a mom, as a woman, as a child of God, and also as a coach. I'd been coaching, guess what? Marriage, family, covenant in the faith based space for probably 5 or 6 years by then. So if you can imagine the very identity, and we use the word platforms these days, the very platform that you've built for yourself based on a particular idea, and that being the thing that has blown up in your face and is shattered all over the floor in 1,000 pieces. And I think of it like the unwanted pregnancy. Eventually it's going to show. And so through a series of absolutely divine events, I cannot begin to share all of that with you because we have a great topic to cover today. But amidst a series of divine events, I am alive. I am with you here today. Um, my children and I are with me. We are safe. And we're continuing to grow, relearn, unlearn, and chart a new course for ourselves. Throughout that entire experience, I wrote a book. It's actually my second book. It's a memoir, and it's called I Choose Life: Rewrite Your Love Story and Change Your Legacy. And it is a memoir, but it's not just my story. It is a lifeline. It is a roadmap for those who have experienced betrayal or trauma or abuse. And that's any kind of abuse. So, physical abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse, spiritual abuse, religious abuse. Um, what is that? How to navigate that is all here in this book. I don't have my fancy labels to show you, but you can find this at thereboundcoach.com/book. That is thereboundcoach.com/book. You can get one of these, and I will write you a love note and mail it to you. Or you can get an ebook copy right there. All that information, or one from Amazon, all that information is at thereboundcoach.com/book. Okay, so wanted to share that with you so that we can stay connected. But let me tell you, today is so important. Today is so important. I know it because of the way that the topic came to me. I know it because of all the technical difficulties that I just had, and how this message is getting to you today. That's how I know how important this is. So, I want to talk about last week we talked about work stress, or we talked about stress and how to handle stress. But today I want to talk specifically about work because I serve high achieving women. And here's what I know about high achievers: we are some of the hardest workers you will ever meet. We're some of the hardest workers you'll ever meet. And in my choose life story, we often forget the choice that we have. So I talk about choosing life for myself. I talk about how you can choose life in different areas, but we get a choice. And so often in our work lives, we feel like we don't have a choice for a myriad of reasons, but we may feel like we don't have a choice in where we work, or how long we work. And we do have choices. And so I want to talk about some of our choices today, and in particular, how to keep work from killing you. And how do you even know if that's even your situation? Like, man, I'm stressed, but I don't know if it's that bad. Well, let's talk about it. Okay, let's talk about it. So, we spend 90,000 hours of our lives at work. And so this is a statistic based on America, and based on the 8 hour work week, or I'm sorry, 8 hour work day, 40-hour work week, and how many years we spend working in that fashion. 90,000 hours. That's one third, they estimate, one third of the average adult's life, the average person's life. One third we spend at work. And many people start their careers, you know, there may be, hey, I want to go do this thing that's very meaningful, that's in line with my gifts and talents, that maybe my parents want, or something that I imagine is going to help me out of this station in life into the next station in life, right? But so often we get detours to whatever plan we had, and we make choices based on whatever's happening right now. And life keeps happening. So the perfect setup we thought we were going to have to make those measured decisions and those measured steps, they just don't always happen. And we end up wherever we end up, right? Now, sometimes people get a second career in their lives, a third career, they retire from this and they start something new, which is an exciting prospect. However, many of us are just taking stepstone to stepstone, and we may find ourselves in places where you just feel pulled in many directions. You may feel just frustrated. You may feel overwhelmed, and just like there's no hope. So, just like I was saying in my marriage, my ex husband was really committed to not changing, and I was committed to staying married. So, I felt incredibly hopeless. And that may be where you are. And you may not be like, you're like, look, I don't feel terribly hopeless. I don't feel like I'm going to die. I'm just really stressed, right? So all of that pulls into play. In Japan and in India, they have actual language, they have words for this idea of work killing you. And there's no way I can pronounce the Japanese word, so I'm not even going to try, but I can tell you that in India, they call it dying in slow motion. Dying in slow motion. This is where prolonged stress, and if you're in a people helping career field, you know this. I don't have to tell you about sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. I don't have to tell you about fight, flight, or freeze, or fawn. I don't have to tell you about that. What I will say is we can live in a perpetual stress response, and especially those who are people helpers, who really care about other people, and populations that are disadvantaged for one reason or another. We really care about those folks. Even still, we may still put our minds and hearts and bodies in that same fight, flight, freeze situations than the people that we are caring about and serving. And when we're in that perpetual state, this is, they link that to high blood pressure, they link it to diabetes, which is wild because, we blame other things for that. No one ever relates that to stress. And of course, very serious things like cancers and, other ailments in the body. And even if you're not physically sick, you might be like, my physical things have nothing to do with that. Even if we're not physically sick, if we are mentally exhausted, which means you can get sleep and still wake up exhausted, just this feeling of never being at rest, never being at peace, always running, 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 running. If you have trouble sleeping at night, if you are snapping at your children or other people that you love, you just don't have patience. If you're not enjoying your hobbies or things that normally would light you up and normally would fill your cup, and it's just not happening. If you're lonely in the room full of people, it can be related to the stress that comes from a certain kind of work environment. And for some folks, their decision is like, okay, this work is stressing me out. I'm going to choose a different job, or I'm going to choose a different career. And for many others, that's not the viable option at the moment. And there's a bunch of reasons for that. It's a bunch of reasons for that. This may changing the job or changing your company is not the right decision for you at this time, but the work itself, or sometimes your team, or sometimes yourself, is causing for a very, very stressful situation that's affecting you and could, in all honesty, be killing you. So, what can we do? What can we do so that work doesn't kill us? What can we do not just to survive, not being in that coping and crisis dance that I explained earlier, but to really thrive, more than just make it through the day, more than just make it through the week, more than just get to the weekend and try to breathe and then not breathe and go back, and not just work through the weekend for some of you, If you have this 9 to 5, 5-day work week, and you are working into the wee hours in the morning, and you are working over the weekend, and you can't get it off of your mind, there's some things to do. You know, there's some things to do. We should not, we should not as capable adults, and we are capable, right? We don't have to allow any situation to take our mental health, to take our physical health, to take our emotional health. We have power and we have choices and we can choose life. And so I want to, I have said all other stuff not in my notes, but I want to see if I can find myself here. So sometimes it's the work itself, sometimes it's a leadership thing or your team with people, right? Or sometimes it's you or a combination of all of those. And I would wager for a lot of us who may find ourselves in severe work stress, it's probably a combination of all of those. It's a combination of, and you may just have a profession where your profession is just a high stress profession. I imagine the folks who answer the 911 calls, they have a high stress profession, right? So it wouldn't matter the team that they worked with, or even their personal background. Like the work itself carries a heavy mental and emotional load. So you may be there, and people helping people helping careers can definitely be there, but it's normally a combination of those. So if you're in a situation where changing your work is not the right choice for you right now, what can you do? What can you do? There's a lot you can do. I'm so glad you asked. Okay. And I will tell you this too. How do I know I'm in coping and crisis where it comes to work? So we can be in coping and crisis in any area of our lives, not just relationships. So in a work situation, coping and crisis looks, if you're doing the coping dance, that looks like quiet quitting, right? So these are folks that work just hard enough not to be fired, and the bosses pay just enough so they don't leave, and they're kind of in this love hate tolerance relationship, right? um, you may cope by gossiping or complaining a lot. um, Expressing how you feel is one thing, constantly complaining is another, because and it's an slippery slope. It's an easy place to fall into, because you're thinking, oh, I'm just processing, but we only know what we tell ourselves, right? Your brain only knows what you tell it, your heart only knows what you have told it, how you're interpreting the story in the events that surround us. So events happen, things happen, how we interpret what happens, how we tell ourselves what the circumstance means, that makes such a difference. And when we are, I don't want to use the word habitual, but when we are um, often pulling the vent and complaining and complaining and complaining, what we speak comes toward us. Okay, so it's you can call it karma, you can call it reaping and sowing. It's all the same. It's all the same. What you speak comes toward you. So be careful what you speak. Be careful what you speak. Be careful what you speak. Even if you're like, oh, but it's true. Be careful what you speak. If you don't want that to continue being true, choose your words wisely. Okay, that's just a tip. And I'll also say this: every situation in every stage and every level of employment or career can be in the coping and crisis dance. So, just a note to those who are in leadership: if you're in leadership in a workplace, you could also be in this coping and crisis, not just as an individual, but as a workplace. You could be surviving, 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 and crisis is happening all around when we don't treat our colleagues well, whether we're talking about people who report to us or people we report to. When we don't treat our colleagues well, that has an effect over time. When we don't consider them and just pass down the requirements because that's the requirement, right? And we don't find ways to do well by our people, they crack. They crack. They break. They quit. It affects everybody and everything. So just a, in and no matter where you find yourself in a career ladder, no matter where you find yourself in a work team, we all can take that note. We all can take that note. So you can maybe like, well, I don't manage anybody, so that's not for me. It's definitely for you. If you manage a family, it's for you. If you manage some kids, it's for you. If you manage a PTA team, it's for you. If you volunteer at your church and you're on a team, it's for you too. Okay? How we treat each other matters. How we pass down information matters. How we communicate matters. How we handle what we handle matters. Okay? So we can also be in coping and crisis on an organizational level. And I just encourage those who have influence over how an organization moves to consider that. Okay, so I'm going to give you 3 categories, and then I'm going to give you how that works in the everyday. Okay, how that shows up in an everyday situation. So, how do you choose life for you? How do you choose life for work? Okay, number one, separate work from worth. So many times this is an identity conversation. It's an identity conversation because we've conflated achievement with worth. That's something culturally going on. It's not just, you know, one particular kind of person. This is a cultural thing where we've conflated work with worth and achievement with worth and material things or finances with worth and whatever it's going to take. This is how we end up using busy and tired as badges of honor. I work so hard, I'm so busy, I'm so tired. They call that hustle culture. Um, and we've used that as I'm important. Now, at the bottom of it, we all desire to feel special and important. Every person on the planet, everybody has a deep desire to feel special and important. And how it is we get to that end, the means we get to that end might be different. But for a lot of folks here in American culture, it's about or has been about how hard you're working, how hard your hustle is, what you're getting at, right? And we conflate this importance with how crowded the calendar is, right? And we add stuff. When it's not there, we add some more stuff to make sure we're extra full and we're extra important. Okay. So separating work from worth. Number two, having a growth versus a fixed mindset. So this is similar because it goes back to this identity. If we have an identity in being smart and being accomplished and being well put together in achievement, in making a difference, in showing up as perfect to our superiors, however that looks, right? If we want to, if the goal is I need to show up perfect, we're gonna have a heck of a struggle when life doesn't show up perfect, and we know it never does. We know it never does. It never does. So we're always in this perpetual cleanup game. When I was married, I explained to you it was kind of like a house of cards. I was working really hard to look like I had it together. And I thought, I thought I did. I told myself all sorts of stuff. Told myself all sorts of stuff so that I can show up in a room confidently. But the truth was, it was so broken and corroded. It was more than just broken. It was corroded. It was poisonous. There was filth all through it. But I was doing my best to keep showing up. And I was a professional, and those I worked with in my professional career did not know what was happening in my life. And later, once everything came out, they were like, I had no idea. I had no idea. I heard that so many times. I had no idea what all was going on in your life. That's number one, because I told myself stories I needed to tell myself to cope, right? But I was working hard on that house of cards and making sure that I showed up in a particular fashion. And there's time and season for the survival mode. There is time and season. So you hear phrases like, oh, don't survive, you should thrive, right? There's seasons for survival. Even in the workplace, there's seasons for survival. There is seasons. Put your head down, get your work done. Don't you, we're not saying anything. We're not making any moves. We're surviving. We're coping. There is time and season for that. Okay, so don't feel like you have to skip that to go do something else. But fix first, growth mindset. Mindset. I do not have it in reach. So there's a book called Mindset, um, by Carol Dweck. Pretty sure I've shared this on a Rebound Coach Live before, but there's a book all about mindset, and it's essentially that many people give themselves an identity that is fixed, right? So I am smart, I am beautiful, I am whatever we say we are, and anything that challenges that causes a crisis. So if you have given yourself a fixed mindset of, I am credible, I am established, I am intelligent, I have my stuff together, and then someone or something comes to challenge that, we can have a crisis. Okay, we have a crisis, and we spend a lot of time working to prove that no, I do have it all together. No, I am worth it. No, I am good enough, right? You may be getting feedback at work that's constantly saying you're not good enough. Your work isn't good enough. You are not good enough. You're not fast enough. You're not complete enough. You didn't do it right. And that, for a perfectionist or a recovering perfectionist, that can be quite challenging. That can be quite mentally and emotionally challenging. Okay, and you might find yourself trying to prove that you are good enough. What I want to encourage you is, number one, you are already good enough and you have nothing to prove. You have nothing to prove. You are already good enough. You have nothing to prove. You are already good enough and you have nothing to prove. You have nothing to prove. Whoever the they are, whether they believe you or not, you are already good enough and you have nothing to prove. Okay. A growth mindset essentially means that your benefit, right, your competence doesn't come from what you already know, it comes from what you are learning. And it comes from the fact that you are learning is more accurate. So not that I need to prove what I already know is enough. It is, I need to show that I am, not even show that I need to be actively learning. Actively learning is the win. That is the win. So asking questions doesn't prove that you don't know enough. Asking questions shows that you are actively learning. And that is the win. And it is the word is not countercultural, it is counterintuitive. It is counterintuitive to behave this way. That's why they wrote this book in the first place, right? So to help us understand there's a different way to look at life and a different way to look at ourselves. And so, while it is counterintuitive, it is a culture that any group of people can develop. A family group, a group of volunteers, a group of friends, a group of coworkers. We can develop this culture of growth mindset where we're not having to prove that we're good enough or competent enough or have it all together. That we can ask questions, that we can get it wrong, that we can make mistakes, that we can take too long, and it doesn't affect our worth. The way we can do that for a colleague, the way you can do that for anyone that you care about, is to speak with compassion, speak with empathy, and not judge. Just not judge. People respond to that. That I used to judge divorced women really, 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 really badly. And I thought that I was being kind, right? So even though I had all these bad judgments in my head, like they were quitting on their marriages, and I was of the true faith. It's funny now, but it was not funny. It was not funny. It was wrong. It was rude. It was horrible. But I thought I was better than them because I was staying in an abusive marriage and they had left theirs. So twisted. Anyway, anyway, in all my judgment, I never thought that I communicated the judgment. I thought it was just something in my head. I wasn't even aware of it most of the time, and definitely not something anybody else could tell. But guess what I learned, ladies and gentlemen, when I got to the other side of my crisis, okay, and I started to meet divorced women who were incredibly devoted to their faith, incredibly devoted to their marriages, and were in situations like mine and wasn't sure if it was okay to be safe, right? I went back to women I knew in my real life and that I had judged. I went back to them and I said, I am so sorry that I judged you, and maybe you didn't know it. And I had one in particular I remember so quickly. I went to her wedding and she got divorced quickly, and she was in the same faith community I was, and I was like, wow, I don't even believe in divorce like that. God. And I kind of looked down my nose at her, and I remember going back and apologizing and saying, what, I'm so sorry. I judged you, and I don't think I said anything, so maybe you didn't know. And she's like, I knew. And it shocked me. It shocked me that she knew. But the fact was, people can tell. So people can tell when you're judging them. People can tell when you look down on them. People can tell when you have decided that they are incompetent. They know, regardless of the language you think you are choosing. So I want to encourage you to check your own heart. We are human beings. We are human beings. You work among human beings who do mess up, who maybe don't meet the mark, and they still don't deserve your judgment. They don't deserve your condescending undercurrent. And I encourage anyone and all of us to put on glasses of compassion in the way that we talk to each other and the way that we talk to ourselves. Okay? The way we talk to ourselves. When we talk about work killing you, it the externals are one thing, right? Your workload, the team you're with, the culture of your company, that's one dynamic. But the bigger one is the one that's internal. What you're bringing to the work, how you're showing up at work, what your expectations are that you put on yourself. Okay, that's and your response to failure. So when you miss your own mark, you're not um as organized as you'd like to be. You're not as on time as you'd like to be. You've missed deadlines or two or three or five, right? Got my hand up too. When we're in those situations, what's the inner voice that speaks to you? What do you say to yourself? Are you calling yourself dirty names? Are you remembering all the failures in your life and telling yourself you're a failure? Are you telling yourself that you're hopeless? Are you making this about your identity? Because when we do, we can reach that hopeless place, and we can drive up our blood pressure, and we can drive up all the fight or flight emotions, the cortisols and all that stuff that make us sick, that make us unwell mentally, emotionally, and physically. We do that to ourselves with the inner turmoil. So if you mess up at work, um, and you call yourself an idiot, or somebody calls you an idiot, right? Or they may not say those words, but they said it. They said it without saying it, right? How do you respond to that? And I'll tell you this too. If someone calls you an idiot and you don't believe them, it does not affect. It does not affect. It's like if someone said, "Hey Dallas, you're a white girl." I'd be like, no, right? Because I know what I know, right? I'm not, or more outlandish than that, like, "Hey, you're Asian," or something like that. No, absolutely not, right? It doesn't matter what they say. It doesn't land because I don't believe it. I don't believe it. But if they said something I did believe, I deal with a lot of women who have experienced betrayal. And some of the inner questions that come with marital betrayal is, I wasn't good enough. Why wasn't I good enough? Right? I'm not pretty enough. I didn't please him well enough. All of that happens in the heart. So when they hear externally or internally, I'm not good enough, a part of them believes it. They believe it. And because they believe it, it sticks, and they don't tell themselves they believe it. They don't admit, they don't think that far. What it ends up being is, oh man, I have to prove that I am good enough, because they believe I'm not good enough and I believe I'm not good enough. So I have to prove that I'm good enough. And that gets us on the hamster wheel, ladies and gentlemen. And the problem with that is it never ends. You never satisfactorily, that's not a word. You never completely prove that you're good enough. So you're constantly in this running, chasing a carrot that just you just never get to it. And eventually we run out of time on this earth. Eventually we run out of time on this earth. And do we ever want to look back and say, I proved I was good enough? Or do we want to look back and say, look at the legacy I've left, look at the love that I've produced, look at the love that I've received, look at the difference in the earth because I've existed. Okay, if the latter is for you, I have a couple points. Okay. And so we talked about how to choose life for yourself, how to choose life for your work, the three categories if you're taking notes. Okay. Number one, separate work from worth. Number two, have a growth versus a fixed mindset. And number three, handle others with care. And I did talk about that already. So I want to go through some points quickly. I say with a smile on how that might show up in your everyday situation, your everyday life, your everyday work life. So, things you can know in your heart and your mind, things you can remind yourself to write down and put in front of you. You are not your job. You are not your job. You are not your job. You may have a job or a career or a profession, right? Even if it's something you're incredibly proud of, it is still not you. You are still not it. Okay. You have an identity separate from the work that you do every day. Your ability to complete tasks does not equate your worth. Those are not the same things. How fast you can do the things, how many things you can do, the level of stress or complexity related to the things does not equal your worth. Your worth is intrinsic, and I would say your worth is fixed, right? It is intrinsic. It was given to you by your creator. You did not earn it. You cannot unearn it. You can't like mess up and leave some worth on the floor somewhere. Like, you are already worthy. You are already good enough. You are already more than enough. Okay. Other people's opinion of you is also not your worth. Okay. Even if that's a boss's opinion, a superior's opinion, people with influence and power to make difference in your life, and maybe they don't think so highly of you, that is still not your worth. It's just not. It's their opinion. And Tabitha Brown says, other folks' opinions of you is just not your business. And I love that. And I remember that, and I teach it to my kids. When they say, well, so and so doesn't like me, or so and so said something bad about me, someone else's opinion of you is just not your business. Now, what is your business? Your opinion of you matters quite a bit. Your opinion of you matters more than anything. More than anything. And I hear the religious people say, well, God's opinion matters. God's opinion does matter. But guess what? If you don't believe it, it does not stick. Just like negative things, positives, it's the same. If you've ever been in a situation where someone gave you a compliment and you could not receive it. Oh, this old thing. Oh, I got it on sale. Right? We can't receive it. Or someone says, hey, you did a good job. And you say, yeah, the team was great. No, you did a good job. You yourself. Here's the key. If someone gives you a compliment, thank you, I received that. Even if you don't feel like receiving it, just practice. Thank you, I received that. Thank you. Thank you. I received that. Okay. Where do your personal values motivate you for work? Okay, so it's important to know the parts of you that resonate with the work that you are in. Okay, and I can almost guarantee you that there's something intrinsic that motivates you for work, no matter how long you've been in or what it looks like now. You may be like, oh man, I'm burnt out. It used to be good and it's not good anymore. Regardless, there's something in you that resonates with that line of work, with that company, with that idea. There's something there. So connecting to that brings the value back, brings the life back, brings the hope back. And I think we all desire to do meaningful work. So, what do you get enjoyment outside from? Outs- Ooh, let me read it correctly. What do you get enjoyment from your work outside of getting things done? Okay, so outside of getting things, I really enjoy like checking the box off the list. I make a lot of lists and I like to check the box off the list. I like to say I did the thing. But outside of that, so sometimes there's some work conditions where there's a lot of folks that move something along and you may not have that full autonomy to check the list by yourself, right? To do the big thing or to move as quickly as you'd like. So, what other things bring enjoyment in your workday? What other pieces of the work really matter to you? So, tied with the point from before, really connecting those things matter. What are you bringing what are you bringing to your work? What's the value that you bring to the team? Remembering that is an important thing too. Remembering who you are in a group, your role to play in a group. Now, that may be your work title role or may not be. But there's group moms. There's definitely group moms, and they're not always the leader of the group, but someone who's nurturing, caring, and imagine the person who brings donuts to the office all the time or brings little candies or writes thank you cards and notes for people. Like there's a group encourager, there's obviously a group leader, there's a group helper and supporter, there's builders, right? There's gatherers. So find your role. um are you the master of your heart and mind? Okay, you are, and I'll say this definitively, you are the master of your heart and mind. Don't give your power away. Okay, don't give your power away. What does that look like? Allowing someone else's opinion, your workflow, the demands on you, whatever that is, to decide how you're going to feel that day. Even if it's like, even if the situations are just not great, you're getting call after call after call, everything's going wrong, people are disappointed, there could be consequences, all the things. You still don't have to allow them to tell you how to feel. Okay? You still don't have to allow them to tell you how to feel. You can choose for yourself how you're going to feel, how you are the master of your own heart and mind. Don't give your power away. How can you meet work demands, allowing your best to be enough? This is really, really key. This is really, really key because we can have expectations that are outside of our best, right? We can. And if the bar to hit is someone else's expectation, especially if those expectations move, like when I was married, he wanted me to be like this and I was like that, and then it moved and I need to be like something else, so I try that other thing, and then it moved and it moved and then it moved. Right? So it's really tough when if that's the standard, if that's what's going to make me feel okay and that keeps changing, that makes me crazy, right? That gives the power of my own heart and mind regulation to someone or something else. When you can be the master of your own heart and mind, right? And allow your best to be enough. It may not be enough for this other situation, it may not be enough for whatever, but for you, allow your best to be enough and do your best. So, for the areas where you're not doing your best, you know what it is. You know where you're slacking. You know where you've been quiet quitting, you know, when you've been slacking and passing, okay? Do your best, bring your best, because that brings satisfaction to your own heart, where you know you've done your best. Whether somebody else thinks that you're best or not, their opinion ain't your business, but you know you've done your best. Allow your best to be enough. Allow your best to be enough. Okay, trying to keep track here. What do you allow failures to say about you? So, what do you tell yourself? Again, so we talked about that earlier. What do you tell yourself when you miss a deadline? What do you tell yourself when you've forgotten something? What do you tell yourself? What do you tell yourself? Oh, you're so stupid. I can't believe you did that. You're such an idiot. How dare you? This is why this other thing isn't working out for you. This is why. Like all of that language, you're tearing yourself apart unnecessarily. Unnecessarily, because guess what? Does beating yourself up help? It doesn't. It does not help. It makes you feel bad. It makes you feel sick eventually. You might be trying to work harder, like I'm going to motivate myself with negative things. You don't. You just convince yourself you're not good enough. You behave like you're not good enough. You sabotage the good things that are happening, and it just makes things worse. And if you've ever been in self sabotage, you know what that's like. You know what that's like. You were doing so well, and then you're doing so well, and then, okay? Situations worked out for you, and then, right? Because you told yourself you're bad. You told yourself you're lazy. You're a schmo. That's the words I wanted to say. Tell yourself you're a schmo. You're gonna behave that way, even subconsciously. So please, 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 allow your best to be enough. Okay? Don't tell you when failures happen, and they do, right? So when missed deadlines happen, and they do, you say, okay, take a deep breath. Okay, I'm gonna do my best next time. I'm gonna fix whatever I can fix, whatever's in your control to fix. If you have failed a coworker, make that right. Make that right. Let's just go back to them. You know what? I'm so sorry. I messed this up. I'm going to do my best next time to do better. And here's how I'm going to do better. That's it. And don't tell yourself any story around that. Like don't it is story management if you haven't caught the theme, right? It's interpretation management. How you interpret a series of events, how you tell yourself the story really really does make such the difference. Okay? Okay. How do you get in touch with yourself? Okay, so often we're chasing, and chasing achievement, chasing approval, someone else's approval, and we're just not in touch with who we are and what we care about. And I heard someone say, and I don't know who it was, but I heard someone talk about um, thinking about something that's so meaningful to you that you cry every day, like at least once a day, and that affecting your mental well being. And I think it's so true. Like for me, I can sit in gratitude until I tear up because I'm incredibly thankful for the lives I get to touch, for opportunities like this. It matters. It matters so much, and I'm so very thankful that I get to share space with folks like yourselves. So thinking about something that means so much to you that you cry once a day is very grounding in identity. It's very grounding in who you are. Okay. Um, there's a lot more here, and I probably don't have time to go through all of them. What I will say, and you've heard, okay, you matter. You matter. You matter. You matter. You're important. And you're good enough. Regardless of current performance, you're good enough. Regardless of demands, you're good enough. You are good enough. Regardless of what anyone else has said or done, you are good enough. And should you choose to agree with that, you can show up in a way that is more confident, and not just more confident, more peaceful, more grounded, and you position yourself in a way that you can produce more. You can do better in the metrics that make work successful because you show up from a grounded place. So is self-care bubble baths and naps? Yes. Yes, without a doubt. bubble baths and bubble baths and naps and chocolate and ice cream and fun things that you like to do in your hobbies. Yes, self-care is all those things. But it is also things that are not necessarily comfortable but necessary. Reminding yourself that learning is the goal. Reminding yourself not to sit in judgment. Just like you are worth it, so are they. Just like you are worth it, so are they. Okay, so and we also get what we send out. So if we are being condescending and judgmental and rude, if we're gossiping behind people's back, if we are, tearing other people down, that returns. So if you're not motivated to do right by other folks, but for any other reason, be motivated for that reason because it comes back and it's not fun. So don't put it out there and you won't get it back. Okay? And if you have, go make it right. Go make it right. Go make it right. Be kind. Have hard conversations. We only get to pass through this planet in this fashion at least once, right? We only get to pass through once. I encourage all of us as we are traversing this earth together to do so in kindness and compassion and empathy, to do so in um, giving space, giving space for people, and giving space for people to be great, not just to like, oh, you messed up and I'm not going to be mad at you. Like like this is the things you're good at, let me help you excel, let me help you shine, let me remind you how great you are, right? What if we had a culture of being each other's cheering section instead of each other's critic, right? What would that look like? Could you go tell somebody that you work with how great they're doing and what especially that they're good at? Not like, oh, good job, good job. But like, hey, you are really, really good at managing other people's expectations. You're really, really good. I think you're skilled in with people. I think you're skilled with how you talk to people and how you handle certain situations. I think you're skilled in presenting. I think you're skilled in behind the scenes work. When a team comes together well, magic happens. When a team comes together well, great things happen, and it's not an accident. None of it's an accident. It's all extremely intentional. So I encourage you to be intentional with yourself and intentional with others. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I may come back for part 3 in the work series. We'll just see how things go. Thanks for those on Facebook who watched a first part of a live and came back for this second part. I appreciate everyone. Um, I will catch you all next week. And until next time, folks, choose life.